I'm a leadership coach and mentor. What I'd like to do is to share a story with you of my life that shows you how I managed to get myself into this space of leadership coaching. But before I do that, I suppose I want to quantify what my clients often say and what people hold as traits to be a good leader. So when I often ask my clients what that is, they'll say to me, a good leader is somebody that's got a good set direction, know exactly where we're going. Somebody that's calm in the middle of chaotic occasions. Somebody that is able to empower others around them and build them up to more than what they think they can be. Somebody that, genuinely connects to other people. And through that connection, garners that empowerment. So with the basis of those as leadership traits, I'll go into my story. So when I was 8 years of age, my relationship with my father changed. Prior to this time, I didn't recognise anything, but at this point in my life, he started to become quite angry, and I ended up being the focal point of that anger. So he would physically abuse me. And, what would occur is that we'd have these, he was a physically big man. He was a blacksmith by trade, a steel worker. And so he had arms on him like Popeye, and he would physically give me a good flogging. He'd leave me black and blue, and he'd use whatever he could get his hands on, a belt, his hands, whatever it could be. And, as an 8-year-old, when I look back at this and I can distinguish some decisions that I'd made, what I decided was that I was a coward because I couldn't fight back, obviously. I was unlovable and I was unvaluable. And this went on for a number of years. And I remember a second instance when I was about 11 where I made a new distinction. I remember going to school one day and we had swimming on this day and we were all in a dressing shed, and I'd been pretty good at hiding it. So, I was ashamed of the marks that were on my body, obviously, and I had to go swimming. And so I took my shirt off, and there was a collective gasp in the room of the other kids, and there was a teacher in there as well. And the gasp was around the state of my back. I was black and blue. There were hand marks, belt marks, you name it. I was black and blue. And at this point in time, I decided that what was happening to me was obviously wrong. Because for that reaction to turn up, that was wrong. And the consequence of that decision was that sent me into a place of victimhood. My father was doing this to me, and so therefore I was the victim of physical abuse, domestic abuse. And these are logical decisions to make at the time, but I'll come to why I'm distinguishing them as decisions in a bit. At about 15 years of age, I'm copping a hiding from him, and he's standing over the top of me and he's beating me close-fisted, and I'm lying on the ground, I've covered up, and he's screaming at me, not even a donkey so stupid to do the same thing wrong 3 times. And I remember he finishes and I stand up and I look at him and I said, well, mate, how good are you going? I said, you've been flogging me for the same stuff over and over, and you don't realise that you're not going to change my behaviour. You're going to have to kill me first. And in this moment, I saw genuine fear in his eyes, which gave me this new sense. It was something that I'd never experienced before. It was a sense of power. See, remembering that I'd decided that I was a coward for not being able to fight back, and I still wasn't physically able to fight him back. He would have the wood on me in that area for a long, long time. It would be in my 20s before I was physically big enough to be able to defend myself, despite the fact I didn't need to. But I felt power at this point in time, and I was ill-equipped to deal with that. I was a young man, very low self-esteem, very low self-confidence. But what I started to do was fight. I started to fight, I started to drink, I started to drink, I started to fight. It became a bit of a cycle, which sort of took me right up. I played footy. If there was a fight on the footy field, you'd run in. I had mates that didn't have any dramas finding blues to get into, and so I'd always help them, on the premise of one in, all in, basically. And we'd go on blue. And I got to about 23, and I I really remember this, a new decision coming. I didn't like what was happening. I didn't feel, I was doing all of this because I wanted to feel better about myself, more powerful about myself. But what I actually started to feel was worse about myself. I could see myself becoming my father. And so at about 23, I cleaned myself up. I got off the drink. I enrolled myself in a construction management diploma, and I started to date. And then I found, you know, in this process, I'd been about 6 months. I started to date, and I met my wife, to be of 24 years. And in that was interesting, because remembering that the fundamentals of me is still fairly low self-esteem. I'd cleaned myself up and I was starting to get on the right track, but my esteem was very low. But here was this woman who just loved me for who I was, broken and all, you know. And she's an incredible human being. And as a consequence of that, I made another decision. And what that decision was that I was going to become the best person I possibly could for her, and later on for my children. It's called external validation. And what occurred for me over the course of our 24-year relationship, our marriage, was that I would do anything, more, you know, personal develop, more study, challenge myself in any way I possibly could. And these are all good things, if they're coming from the right space. But they weren't. They were coming from a space of a lack of value, unworthy, unlovable, cowardice. And so we had these two beautiful children, and for the most part of our marriage, we were all incredibly connected. We were a beautiful family, very loving, very respectful family. I became a footy coach. I started to lead young men. I'd work on the premise of them becoming good young men, you know, stand-up citizens, more than rugby. And I wanted to connect. And I did that again because that gave me external validation. Parents loved it, the kids loved it. And I started to feel better about myself. But the problem with all of that is that if that goes away for any one reason, then there's no validation internally. And what occurred was, as part of that process of coaching and stuff like that, we got to a point where I put together a rite of passage program for our under 13s and under 14s, and I ran them consecutively. I did an under 13s rite of passage, and then the next year I ran it again. And we took young men to Kokoda in Papua New Guinea, and we walked that 96k track with fathers and sons, and it was an incredible, you know, experience on both occasions. Fathers and sons bonded. We all bonded as a group. It was an incredibly validating and wonderful experience, and so much good came from all of that work. But on the second trek, I became increasingly aware that I was desperately unhappy. I was unhappy in my marriage, and again, nothing to do with my wife. This is all inside of myself. I couldn't find, despite everything that I was creating in my life, I could not find a place of love and value. And that was really, really difficult. And so, you know, a couple of months after I got back from Kokoda the second year, I ended my marriage. Now, this set a chain of events that I didn't see coming. I wanted to, I'd ended this because I was in pain, but what came was more pain. I went into a space where I ended up in an 8-day panic attack. I was physically unwell. And in the middle of the 8-day panic attack, or just prior to this 8-day panic attack, I'd reached out to a friend, and he'd put me in contact with a mentor, and I'd been seeing a psychologist at this point in time, and it wasn't really having an impact. And I went into this 8-day panic attack, and in the midst of it, my mentor said to me, "Gio, you need to take responsibility for everything, the whole, including you getting beaten when you're an 8-year-old. You have to take full responsibility for creating it all." Now, I resisted that, I've got to tell you. But what she was very eloquent in doing was to show me that if I didn't take responsibility for it, I was never going to be able to change the context of it. I was never going to be able to see it a different way, make different decisions about it, make different decisions about me. And in this moment, started to change my whole life. So slowly but surely, I started to take responsibility for everything. Responsibility for creating my father to beat me, and seeing that as a different thing. So now I've totally healed in that area with my father. I've forgiven him for everything that occurred. I understand fully that he's a good man who did some ordinary things, but what he did wasn't who he is. A lot of what came from him was fear of his own inabilities. And as a consequence of taking responsibility, what I was able to do was to start to find some genuine connection to who I am, love and value of myself. I stopped seeing myself as unlovable. I stopped seeing myself as unvaluable, and I stopped seeing myself as a coward. In fact, what I've come to understand about myself is that continuing to find and struggle and strive to find my way through this is incredibly courageous. What it led me to was a place that has me sharing this story today, a place of being able to dive into vulnerability. Because for every great leader, connection comes from dealing with your shame, which is what I've done, but being able to express yourself in a way where you can be totally open and vulnerable to the consequences that come. When you do that, the people in front of you that you're leading, that you're affecting, that you're influencing, open up to you, and then they start to share from the same space. And when they start to share from the same space, what you start to see is this beautiful flow of human beings showing who they truly are, which is a gift to this planet, instead of hiding it behind the masks that we've all got, you know. The first mask I had was being a brute, you know. I put one on you, you know, I'd start to fight. The second one was a loving father and husband. It wasn't a mask, I genuinely believed I was, but it wasn't about me being a lovable person. See, it was a role that I fulfilled. The pit moment for me, the moment of truth for me, was to find that I'm okay. I am lovable and I am valuable just because I am. And in finding that, what's occurred for me, what's become incredibly apparent to me, is that people now start to bond to that without me even trying. And so for my version of leadership, that's what we create in our programs. We create space for human beings to genuinely show up. We have activities and we undertake processes that allow us to rewire our brains to see things a different way, because that's literally what I've had to do. I no longer see myself as a victim. I see myself as a very powerfully creative human being. And what I look to do now is to share that process, those moments, distinctions, so that those people who wish to engage in it find that for themselves. See, for me now, you know, the greatest reward is to sit in front of a person and watch them open up to who they truly are. And I see that, and it's just a privilege. It's an honour to be a part of that process. So if you'd like to, you know, hear more on that, well, I'll have some more on that on some future videos. But also, you know, click on our website.